What's up guys? It's time for another reaction video. Today we're going to be doing the history of Britain in 20 minutes. It's from the YouTube channel VC3 Productions. They don't have a ton of subscribers, but this actually has about 2 million views, and it's got a pretty good like to dislike ratio, so I feel like it's going to be pretty factual. I actually don't know a lot about Britain's history. Most of my history that I know about them is like everything that has to do with America, that they were conquerors, they took over the world, they were once the superpower, just loved to conquer and take things over. Pretty sure that's a biased opinion, but that is my impression of them as of the moment. At least their history. Obviously, they're still not doing that. They're actually a pretty chill country, and I would love to go to Britain sometime, or rather the UK, and see all the countries and just the beautiful northern mountains on the ocean. So definitely would love to see that someday. Anyway, today we're going to be watching this video. It is going to be a longer video because this video, without even me commenting, is 20 minutes or 21 minutes. But yeah, hopefully we learn a lot. I feel like we will. Let's get into it. A little bit elevator music. Very nice.
The United Kingdom is a nation located in the British Isles, made up of England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
I did actually know it's not just Britain. That's made up of 4 countries, but anyway.
Thousands of years ago, the Isles were inhabited by long-forgotten pre-Celtic people, known as the Beaker culture, named for their distinctive pottery beakers. Little is known of them, but it has been suggested that these people laid the foundations for the mysterious Stonehenge, a series of heavy standing stones which were transported from 150 miles away and arranged to form a calendar, marking the days of the summer and winter solstice. Over time, waves of Celtic-speaking people arrived from the European continent, who soon came to form the Brittonic, Gaelic and Pictish people. These people were not a unified people, but were rather many tribes who shared a similar pagan religion, language and culture. The Romans invaded, conquering what's now England and Wales, but failed to conquer the Pictish tribes to the north. The Romans launched several campaigns into this land they called Caledonia. However, their fortifications...
I love how people that go conquer the lands make up the name of the country they're conquering because they can't speak the language. I mean, the Americans did that with the Americans did that with the Indians in the sense that they call them Indians and they're not technically Indians. But anyway.
...were soon overrun and abandoned, and they retreated to Hadrian's Wall. Their conquered lands were incorporated into the Roman Empire, becoming the province of Britannia. They brought Roman customs and laws, improved infrastructure and connected many towns and cities with Roman roads.
The Romans were very famous for building roads and making cities.
Left, there was a great migration of Germanic tribes. These were the Jutes, Angles and Saxons, with their language Old English. Their settlement pushed many Britons to areas in Wales, Brittany and a kingdom known as Dumnonia, while Scotland eventually evolved into 4 kingdoms. The smallest of these were the Scots, who were originally from Ireland, the Britons of Strathclyde, the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Bernicia and the Picts of Alba. For unknown reasons, the Jutes disappeared from history, but the Angles and Saxons eventually formed 7 kingdoms. Wessex, Sussex, Kent, Essex, East Anglia, Mercia and Bernicia became Northumbria. After the collapse of Dumnonia, the remaining territory of Cornwall fought against the powerful kingdom of Wessex. Cornwall eventually fell under the control of Wessex, but it managed to keep its own culture. Wales at this point was also made up of several separate kingdoms, the largest being Gwynedd in the north, Powys in the east and Dyfed to the south. The British Isles soon saw numerous Norse raiders from Scandinavia. These were the Vikings, and they began settlement on many of the Scottish Isles, the Isle of Man, and they even founded the city of Dublin in Ireland.
Yeah, there's a lot of history on the Vikings I don't know about. I probably would do some videos on them at some point. I know technically, I think they are credited with discovering America originally, but I know they were pretty harsh war tribe people, and they were pretty brutal in what they did, but they were successful.
The Scots and the Picts then decided to unite under Kenneth MacAlpine to form the Kingdom of Alba. The Kingdom of Alba grew strong over the years, and eventually Strathclyde was brought into the fold. Meanwhile, Danish Vikings arrived in the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms for conquest. After fighting the King of Wessex, Alfred the Great, the Danelaw was formed, a land where the laws of the Danes held influence over the Anglo-Saxons, controlling the region and its affairs. The Anglo-Saxons eventually defeated the last Viking king of York, Eric Bloodaxe, and Athelstan became the first king of the English. Although, the newly formed Kingdom of Denmark would conquer England and even found a short-lived Danish dynasty under Canute. The Norsemen had a dramatic impact on the Isles.
Just want to say that is an awesome painting.
So it's no wonder some words in the English language have Norse origin. After defeating formidable sea raiders from Ireland, the Western Isles, Scandinavia and Anglo-Saxon forces from Mercia, Griffith ap Llywelyn subdued his rivals in southwest Wales. Llywelyn became the only Welsh king ever to rule over the entire territory of Wales. He was defeated by the English Earl Harold Godwinson and killed by his own men, leading to the Welsh kingdoms splitting apart once more. At the death of Edward the Confessor, there was a succession dispute between four claimants. Harold Godwinson was elected as king, and managed to defend England from an invasion by the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada.
So Harold and Harold were fighting. That's kind of funny.
However, Harold had to march his armies south to defend against Duke William of Normandy, who had crossed the English Channel. According to tradition, at the Battle of Hastings, Harold was killed by an arrow to the eye, and the Norman invaders were victorious. The new King William defeated a number of rebellions, built a new design of castles called moat and baileys, and introduced a number of reforms, like trial by combat and the doom.
So yeah, moat and baileys, those are definitely pretty ingrained with English history. There's, I think, a lot of those still existent, so it's really cool to see when and who brought that into existence. I think they were really successful. Like, they defended, well, I mean, we'll see, but I'm pretty sure they defended the country for a very long time.
Domesday Book. The Norman dynasty invaded into South Wales and parts of Ireland, creating the Lordship of Ireland. At court, nobles spoke and conducted sessions in the Anglo-Norman language, which endured for centuries and left an incredible mark in development of modern English. After a brief civil war, Henry II would marry Eleanor of Aquitaine, establishing the Angevin Empire, beginning a long rivalry against France. Richard the Lionheart defended much of this territory and also became a central Christian commander during the Third Crusade, achieving considerable victories against his Muslim counterpart, Saladin. Under King John, heavy taxes were imposed on his barons in order to pay for his expensive foreign wars. The barons rebelled and forced John to sign the Magna Carta, a charter that established the principle that everyone was subject to the law, even the king, guaranteeing the rights of individuals, the right to...
Yeah, that was a huge moment in history, signing that. Kind of what they were saying with the... Pretty much a king wasn't like... You couldn't really have a tyrant. Yeah, that's just amazing to see that, like, people getting together and be like, hey, we need like a democracy. It can't just be all about one person and his wishes and wills and whatever he wants to do. So that's amazing.
To justice and the right to a fair trial. Most of North Wales remained independently ruled by several Welsh princes until 1216, when Llewellyn the Great became the ruler of the Principality of Wales. This would be the case until Edward I, who conquered Wales in 1284, effectively becoming part of England. At the death of King Alexander III, Scotland was left with 14 rivals for succession. To prevent civil war, the Scottish magnates asked Edward I of England to elect a claimant. John Balliol was elected king, but was constantly undermined by Edward, who opposed Scottish independence. Edward decided to launch several campaigns to conquer Scotland and depose King John, to which he acquired the nickname Hammer of the Scots. Under a brave Scottish knight William Wallace, the Scots mounted resistance against the English, defeating them at the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Edward marched north in person and defeated Wallace in battle, but Wallace managed to escape. He was later captured and executed, but his efforts allowed Robert the Bruce to rise up and defeat the English, securing Scottish independence. When the King of France died without an heir, Edward III was technically eligible to the crown, through his mother. The French court denied his claim and instead installed Philip of Valois. Edward paid homage to Philip as he owned the lands of Gascony and was essentially a vassal to the King of France. Due to disagreements, Edward reasserted his claim to the throne and invaded France, beginning the 100 Years' War. The English achieved notable victories at the Battle of Crécy, Poitiers and Agincourt thanks to the technical superiority of the longbow, but was unable to conquer the French with the appearance of Joan of Arc, who lifted the French spirit and turned the tide of the war. Upon the death of Edward III, an entire generation was skipped in the line of succession, which prompted bitter rivalry between several claimants. Most notably were the houses of York and Lancaster. Tensions were high until a bloody age of warfare erupted between these two factions in the Wars of the Roses. It's so in-depth and complicated this period will likely become a video of its own. The wars ended with the arrival of the Tudor dynasty, Henry VIII wanting a divorce split with the church, creating his own Church of England. This ultimately led to a series of religious differences.
I think this is what the movie The Other Boleyn Girl is based on. And it was a very big decision when he split from the church, and it created a lot of controversy and uprising. So it's just really interesting to see all these different types. Like, I've heard a lot of these names and stuff, but like seeing them all tied together in a video like this is just amazing.
Differences between future English monarchs. In between his 6 wives and naval adventures, Henry gave Wales representation in Parliament and created the Kingdom of Ireland, but realistically he only controlled an area known as the Pale. In addition, Henry's paranoia and suspicion amounted to tens of thousands of executions, including his friends and wives. During the 16th century, the largest and most powerful empire was Spain, under King Philip II. England, under Elizabeth I, were helping Dutch rebels reject Spanish rule, and many English privateers were also intercepting Spanish silver on its journey back from the New World. This angered the Spanish king, and the final straw came when Elizabeth had Mary Queen of Scots executed, because she did not want Scotland falling under Catholicism. The Spanish Armada, consisting of 130 ships, was deployed to invade England. At the Battle of Gravelines, an English victory forced the Spanish fleet to sail around the British Isles before storms in the north of Scotland destroyed the remaining ships. In retaliation, the English, led by Sir Francis Drake, amassed their own armada to invade Spain, but this too became a failed endeavour. Born in this period, William Shakespeare became a renowned poet, playwright and actor, who contributed significantly to English literature. When Queen Elizabeth of England died without an heir, her closest male relative was James VI of Scotland. James was elected as King of England and Scotland in a personal union, although the countries remained separate political entities. As the first monarch to rule the entire island of Great Britain, several assassination attempts were made by Catholic conspirators. One such assassination attempt was the gun...
That's the way to convert someone to Catholicism, is just to kill them. I mean, again, they don't do that now, but like, the Catholic Church has killed a lot of people in the name of religion, so...
Powder plot by Guy Fawkes, who tried to blow up Parliament. After a failed colony known as Roanoke, England established a successful colony known as Jamestown, which would eventually evolve into the 13 colonies. At first, expeditions to the New World were mainly driven by religious motives, which were predominantly to...
Well, they weren't just... they weren't just religious motives. I think at first it was for resources. The people came over for religious reasons, but the reason why they kept sending people in trade is because they saw the potential wealth of all of the furs and wood and just everything that America had to offer. So, especially because, England's relatively pretty small, and then you have all this just like raw land in a sense that's just up for the taking, kind of. That was definitely a huge draw of why they came over.
Convert the natives to their faith. But colonies became more profitable, as demand for New World crops like tobacco and sugar increased. British ships also made a monopoly on the transportation of captive African slaves that crossed the Atlantic to the Americas. Millions of Africans were shipped in cramped, horrific conditions to work on brutal plantations in the Americas, and essentially became property to their masters.
Yeah.
For 300...
obviously that's an awful thing. We're still... we still have issues with that even today because of what they did. The only thing I would like to point out is England did start it. It was not something started by the... there wasn't really any Americans at the time. Obviously, Americans kept it going for many hundreds of years. It's one of our marks on our history, kind of like the Nazis and the Jews. It's a really sad time in history. It's awful that people treat other people like this. I can't begin to think that why someone would do this to another person is just beyond me. Thankfully, we don't really have slavery anymore. We're still dealing with the repercussions of it, but thankfully it's pretty much abolished in the world. There's obviously still some small portions, but for the most part, most countries have realized that this is not a good thing to have around. So anyway,
100 years this practice continued in the British Empire until it was fully abolished in 1833. This period also saw a wave of plantations in Ireland, where Irish lands were confiscated and given to English and Scottish settlers. Tensions would rise between Charles I and Parliament. Following disagreements, conflicts between royal and parliamentary authority within England led to the English Civil War. The country became divided between parliamentarians, known as the Roundheads, and royalists, known as the Cavaliers. Under Oliver Cromwell and the New Model Army, the parliamentarians defeated Charles and executed him for treason. Cromwell became Lord Protector and dissolved the monarchy, but shortly after his death it was restored under Charles II. Charles II married Catherine of Braganza, and when she arrived from Portugal she introduced the greatest beverage of all time.
tea.
Tea. Tea had been used by China for centuries, but its arrival in the 17th century captured the interest of the English aristocracy, and soon captivated every other.
I'll read this. When making a cup of tea, one does not put the milk in before the water. I don't get that. I must not be British. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand. I thought tea was always made with water. God, I feel so dumb right now.
The Englishmen. In 1685, a Catholic James II became king in a largely Protestant nation. James's daughter Mary and her Dutch husband William were both Protestant, and many nobles unhappy with the Catholic king invited William to become king. William found
that's nice, just get invite. Hey, you want to be king? Yeah, I'll be king. That's nice.
Considerable support when he invaded, and he was soon crowned King William III in what became known as the Glorious Revolution. Although William's supporters dominated the government, there remained a significant following for James II in the Scottish Highlands. Clan MacDonald of Glencoe was one such group who had not been prompt in pledging allegiance to the new monarch. For this reason alone, 38 members of the clan were murdered in what became known as the Massacre of Glencoe. After Scotland's failed colonial endeavours in Nova Scotia and Panama, and an economic crisis in the 1690s, there was a union between England and Scotland, forming the United Kingdom of Great Britain.
Nice.
The House of Stuart had ruled Britain for just over a century, but ended with the death of Queen Anne. Sophia of Hanover was the granddaughter of James I, and her son George became king. Great Britain soon found itself drawn into several European wars, most notable being the War of the Spanish Succession and the 7 Years' War. Victories in these wars resulted in territory for the empire, particularly in North America, although it resulted in considerable debt. In order to make up for this debt, King George III ordered heavy taxes be placed on the 13 colonies. This, among other reasons.
Yep, that was a mistake. Don't tax people you tell like across an ocean. I mean, we're taxed heavily now, obviously, but it's just interesting. I don't know, just the kind of the balls on the guy. Like, oh, well, hey, we've been fighting wars over here, so let's tax these guys over here, get money. Obviously, it didn't work out, but
culminated into the American War of Independence, and with financial help from France and Spain, the Americans were victorious. The East India Company, which was founded by Elizabeth I.
Just real quick, yeah, the main reason why we were victorious is because England was fighting another war at the time, and it was just a matter of distance. The technology wasn't available for quick travel, so those are the main reasons why we won. But anyway.
First had grown rapidly, and even operated its own military and controlled a sizable amount of territory. The company had set up fortified warehouses where they traded with many India rulers, acquiring important luxuries like textiles and spices. One of the most important cities of all was Bengal, as it had a large taxable population. The governor of Bengal, Robert Clive, ordered that the population grow opium to export to China, instead of growing food, as it proved to be a great source of income. However, when a famine struck, it resulted in the deaths of millions of people. Meanwhile, Captain James Cook arrived at New Zealand and the southeast coast of Australia, although he wasn't the first to discover the area because of past Portuguese and Dutch explorers. However, unlike the Dutch and Portuguese, Britain claimed it as their new penal colony, known as New South Wales, with the first...
I had no idea that Australia was once a penal colony. They did that over here in Georgia. That's crazy that they thought they would need such... So why would you need so much land for prisoners? I mean, England's like pretty small, and then you need half of Australia just for prisoners. That's crazy.
First convicts arriving in 1778. A new threat had emerged from France, French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte.
Yeah, don't know too much about Napoleon. Definitely be doing some videos, or at least a couple, in the future on Napoleon, because I know he's considered a great strategist and military leader, so it'll be really interesting to learn more about him. But anyway, we will continue.
Napoleon had come to dominate most of Europe, but Britain's advantage was that she was an island, and the Royal Navy had become a major force at sea. Invasion of Britain was near impossible, and in a series of coalitions Napoleon was defeated. By the end of the Napoleonic Wars, Britain was growing rapidly into a superpower based on their supremacy of naval engineering. Furthermore, in Ireland the Great Famine struck, a disease killing potato plants. Ireland, which had merged with Britain, relied heavily on this crop for food, but the British government forced Ireland to export what little food they had to other areas. Without any aid or food, Ireland's population plummeted by half due to starvation and emigration to countries like the United States. Things weren't looking so great in India either, as India was rebelling against company rule. The East India Company had employed many Indian soldiers known as sepoys, who were under the command of British soldiers. These sepoys grew increasingly unhappy, and a revolt soon occurred. Yet it quickly failed due to a lack of unity between Indians. After the rebellion, the British government took direct control, with Queen Victoria being declared Empress of India. During the 19th century, the world was forever changed by the Industrial Revolution. Society was transformed by technological advances and increasing mechanization.
Yeah, this is actually a part of history I've actually studied. It's just amazing how fast machines were built and just how fast they changed. I think it's like a span of like 40 years, the whole world had changed forever, like never to go back to how it was before. Just amazing time in history, just the inventions and everything. Anyway, yeah, just wanted to kind of point that out. It was an amazing time in history.
And would launch Britain to global dominance. Some of the greatest innovations and inventions were the sewing machine, the fire extinguisher, steam-powered engines and turbines, the electric motor and photography. The telegraph was also a major invention, as a message could now be sent from Britain to India in a matter of hours. The establishment of railways and trains also transformed transport forever. Instead of travelling days by horse and carriage, it now only took a matter of hours by train. Engineering and communication advances not only united the empire, they triggered a manufacturing boom like no other. People flocked from rural areas to city centres for jobs. Productivity reached an all-time high, but the consequences of mass migration resulted in extremely cramped and polluted cities. However, with these problems that were generated, it resulted in an improved sewage system. Newcastle focused...
Yeah, that was actually really important for that time, was the health and well-being of people in cities was really bad before a proper sewage system was put in place. So once that was done, it was actually like safe and healthy to live in cities. Before that, there were like rat infestations, and I mean, just open sewage just isn't healthy for people to be around. So yeah, it was really important that they solved that problem at that time. Everyone coming into the city, you have to solve this problem because everyone's using the bathroom. So anyway, yeah, just kind of it's really important that was done fairly quickly after people started like really going to the cities.
Focused on shipbuilding, Manchester the cotton industry, Liverpool became a major trading centre, Middlesbrough fixated itself on iron and steel works, the presence of iron ore, limestone and large coal deposits in the West Midlands and South East Wales prompted the establishment of ironworks, and Scotland boomed in the linen industry. The Victorian era also saw a major change in society, as families from the poorest backgrounds gained access to education, although it was much stricter than today's standards. The 1860s also saw the rise of the greatest food combination ever: fish and chips. Towards the end of the...
I've never had true fish and chips. Obviously, if I ever go over to the UK, I would definitely have some fish and chips.
In the 19th century, European powers came together at the Berlin Conference to divide Africa between them. A group in South Africa known as the Boers, who were originally Dutch settlers, proved difficult for the British. The Boers lived in two nations, the Free Orange State and the Republic of Transvaal, and both resisted British rule using guerrilla warfare. To counter this, the British placed many women and children in their tens of thousands into concentration camps, where many died from starvation and disease. Britain became a major player in the First World War, and many men proudly volunteered to serve and protect their country. The Great War, as it was called, saw the use of new technology, such as dreadnoughts, warplanes, artillery, machine guns, grenades, chemical weapons, bolt-action rifles, and the first use of the tank. Many faced horrific conditions in the trenches and witnessed gruesome battles. Millions died, and many returned home shell-shocked by what they had seen. The Empire reached its...
Yeah, it just always saddens me seeing that. Like, I love technology and advancement, but advancement of weapons just really kind of... I mean, people are really good at making machines to kill other people. It's sad, but it happens, and it's just the world we live in, but it's really sad.
Its territorial height in 1921 after gaining territory from Germany and the crumbling Ottoman Empire.
Do they still own all this?
Empire. The Empire now ruled over 400 million people and controlled 1/4 of the world's landmass. But the reality was, Britain could no longer afford to build bases or ships to defend its empire as it had before 1914. Ireland finally managed to break away from British rule and formed the Irish Free State, and shortly after became a republic. The Second World War was more brutal and horrific than the First. Most of Europe had fallen under German occupation, and under Prime Minister Winston Churchill, Britain stood strong during the Battle of Britain and the Blitz. Britain were extremely successful at intercepting and decoding enemy communications, with the likes of Alan Turing, who cracked the German Enigma code. The war ended with an Allied victory, but many nations within the Empire felt a desire for independence, and it was clear the Empire was about to break. India was one such nation who were ready to declare their independence. Mohandas Gandhi practiced a non-violent approach, and this proved successful, as shortly after India gained independence.
So that looked like a little mini Deadpool.
The Commonwealth of Nations was formed to improve relations and economic ties with former colonies. This still remains today, with 53 members united by language, history, culture, and shared values of democracy. The British Empire officially ended with Hong Kong, Britain's last colony, being handed over to China in 1997. The Empire committed many atrocities on many different people, imposing their culture and civilization while often wiping out native ones. On the other hand, this brought about globalization and the uniting of the modern world. And without such innovations and industrialization, the world might have been a very different place. The United Kingdom suffered a small economic recession in 2008, but has since recovered. It is a multicultural society, with each region retaining a presence of its history and culture. If you ever visit, look out for the Welsh cake, the haggis, the whiskey, the Chelsea bun, the parmo, the Cumberland sausage, the Yorkshire pudding, or the Cornish pasty.
Oh, man, all that looks so good. Oh, makes me want to go now.
The UK remains a member of NATO, United Nations and the World Trade Organization, and uses the pound currency. In 2016, a referendum resulted in 51.9% of voters in favour to leave the European Union, although the countries within the United Kingdom became divided on the matter, leading to the many questions of its future unity. Thank you for watching. Let us know your thoughts in the comments, like, subscribe, follow us on Twitter, support us on Patreon.
Well, yeah, that was an awesome video. it's just crazy to see how much they had actually like taken over at one time, especially if you include the U.S. in that, like U.S., Canada, half of Australia, India, Africa. I mean, that's a huge amount of land that they were, and it was only up until like World War One that they kind of lost it. It's just incredible that they were able to do all that. I mean, definitely. I mean, that is a superpower if there ever was one. Like, actually, have history of a superpower. Like, that's legit. Yeah, I learned a lot. That was an amazing video. I would definitely probably do a little bit more on the order stuff with Napoleon and those 100 Years War, all that kind of stuff. I would probably do a little bit more deeper videos on to actually learn more about them, since this was just kind of a crammed video. But it was really well made. I really liked it. The guy who did it is VC3 Productions. But yeah, anyway, that is it for today. If you like what you saw, comment and subscribe, and just let me know what you think. All right, peace out.